All right. Happy Friday, everyone. Rich Swerbinsky with the Mortgage Collaborative here once again with the rundown with Rob and Rich. Take you into the weekend, going through all the latest and most relevant news in the mortgage industry. And joined as I am every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern by Rob Krisman. Rob, good to see you.
Good afternoon.
Where are you this week? What's the Where's Rob update?
I returned from Oklahoma Wednesday. I don't know. I was at the Oklahoma Mortgage Bankers Association conference, which was well attended, and it was a good group. Everybody was excited to see each other in person, so it was fun. It was a nice event.
Very cool. I've never been to the state of Oklahoma, but I've heard good things.
Yeah, it's the city. The Oklahoma City has some good museums. So if you have a chance, as bad as it sounds, you should visit the Bombing Museum. It's very, very well done.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Cowboy Museum, which has a room dedicated to barbed wire.
Sounds
not to be missed.
Yeah. So, and this week, very pleased to be joined by a special co-host, the co-founder of Simple Nexus, big Florida State Seminoles football fan, Ben Miller. Ben, thanks for joining us, bud.
Yeah, appreciate it. A big fan even still today. For the Noles struggling a little bit, but
big one at home against the Canes this weekend.
The Canes, they better take care of business. You can throw the records out the door, right, when you have a rival game. So get the biggest hits, big plays. It's always a ton of fun.
Except the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry. We win that game every year, regardless of what's going on. So, but so Ben, man, the Simple Nexus TMC partnership, it goes back like 6 years. I mean, I remember talking to you and Matt. I mean, at that point, you guys were really just kind of like a mobile app for the mortgage industry company. And then you developed a great front-end point of sale platform. Now kind of bringing it full circle with your closing platform that so many of our members are starting to adopt. And is this the year of the e-close? We've been to like the 8th year in a row that this is going to be the year of the e-close, but it feels like legitimately 2022 is the year of the e-close. Last year and a half, it was hard for lenders to really change anything with how busy, uncertain, and then busy the climate was. But I'm starting to hear now from our members, like, this is the time to get it done. I'm sick of talking about it. What has your experience been?
Yeah, no, totally. We can just jump into this right out of the gate that you've always had e-close around. We know that, right? And then the pandemic was a big catalyst for people to really focus in on e-close, say, how can we execute this? We have to do this right now. Well, the fundamentals had not changed prior to that of what the blockers were. You had, disparate providers of, I got to go over here for a note, this vendor over here for a vault, this person here is going to help me do a hybrid, someone over there is going to do Ron, and trying to hobble all that together was a blocker in adoption. And so even though you had the pandemic that, forced people to look at it and try to cram the square peg into the round hole, so to say, you didn't get a ton of adoption. I mean, obviously it got more than it was, right? But it was still kind of hard for people to do. And that's what we focused on, is to create an elegant solution that brings it all together under one vendor. And so coining the term homeownership platform and being able to go end to end in one login, and that's made all the difference, right? I mean, there are some legacy providers that were more point solution around e-close, and our customers, the reaction for us was like, hey, we really want to go with you guys because our borrower can be in the same experience all the way through. And I think that's been huge. But at the same time, it's a lot of change, for a lender. And so, I think I was mentioning this to you earlier at a show or something, that there's also a component that we are productizing of the change management of how to adopt e-close. How to sit down and say, okay, here is an elegant end-to-end solution, but how do we talk to our settlement agents to say, this is how we're going to do it now? And how do we talk to our loan officers and say, this is why this is important? Some of the biggest lift is coming from like the CFO side of the house and saying, hey, I can be more efficient with my warehouse line, or I don't have to, pay as much carry interest or whatever, and I can make more money. Or the shippers saying, this is a way better way to ship electronic docs as opposed to paper docs on FedEx and whatnot. But the LO may not see that. Like, well, geez, I just want the thing to close. Like, what do I care? What your problems are in shipping the thing. But being able to coach people, lenders, on how to really create that empathy across departments and help people understand why this is such a lift for different departments. And then coaching lenders through how do you talk with your investors and warehouse lines that are adopting this, trying to learn how to adopt this just like everyone else. And to say, this is what this means when we have a note, an e-note or whatnot. And how do you make those calculations to say, okay, even though I have only 5 out of the 6 are going to accept it, and I don't know, at the front end of the mortgage, if it's going to be that 6th one who's not going to take an e-note, if I'm going to execute with them or not, how do I make that decision on should I go all in on an e-note initially or not? We can walk them through that decision-making process, and kind of hold their hand in the whole MERS process, right? Getting registered and whatnot. So I think those are big elements that were missing before that are here now, so that 2022, right, can be that year of e-close to kind of take some of the mystery and friction from the process.
Yeah, some of the impediments and roadblocks are starting to come down. You see it happening, and there's a lot of moving parts to it, though, as you mentioned, from investors, warehouse lines, how you sell it to a customer, MERS piece of it, so on and so forth. And yeah, I've heard good things about your change management services, because that's such a big part of it. Honestly, it's just managing all that really is a lot for lenders to deal with, and I think that's been a big part of the roadblock to this point. But yeah, from your lips to God's ears, hopefully this is the year finally we have e-close in the mortgage industry, because it at this point is getting kind of crazy. So
Hey, Ben, since we're talking about the company itself right now, if you were let's say you were a mid-size or small consumer direct only company, what is the offering? What is the value add for them for using you? How hard is it to roll out?
Yeah, this is an interesting topic in that we see some of the lines blurring and constantly blurring between what is consumer direct, what is distributed retail, who should use what tool, is this tool better for that, or the other. So consumer direct, they need a seamless, elegant, point of sale experience, for their borrowers coming in, and we can provide that. But I think another element that we bring to the table is we are the leader in mobile tools for loan officers and mobile productivity. And even though you may be a consumer direct LO and traditionally, sit maybe in a call center setting or sit at a desk all day, you still have a borrower that expects almost 24/7 service, right? And so to be able to interact with your pipeline or do your job when you're away from your desk and keep loans moving is something that consumer direct shops really look to us to be able to deliver for their loan officers. Because without that, it may be a Saturday afternoon and you're trying to enjoy time with your family and somebody asks for something. You're like, oh man, I have to go back to the office, where my computer is and all the stuff laid out on the table, and that was the before picture, right? And it eats up your Saturday. But the after picture is, okay, yeah, no problem. I just pull out my cell phone, I have everything there. I have my pipeline there. I can, do pricing or look at a credit or report, or send a pre-approval letter or things of that nature that you hear about in distributed retail because they're always on the go, but it directly applies to that consumer direct LO as well. So I think, that's a huge value prop, that people are looking to us for. But it's really interesting when I talk about the lines are blurring, we get phone calls, they're starting to pick up now. And we saw this in 18 and 19 when rates were going up in 18, right? We get phone calls from the consumer direct shop that says, hey, I used to be really heavy refi focused and I have to do more purchase business or I'm going to die, right? And they know of us as a very purchase centric tool because not only do we handle point of sale, but we have all of the, borrower nurturing, through co-branding with referral partners and things of that nature to allow someone to engage with you before they fill out a 1003 or NERLA. And so people call us and say, hey, I heard that your technology is really good for purchase business. Help me transition over to purchase business. And it's just kind of funny because then we also hear on the other side of the fence, your distributed retail folks that are saying, wow, margins are getting compressed and LOs are expensive. Like, how do I spin up a consumer direct shop and maybe drive some efficiencies that consumer direct has? And so we kind of hear it, the grass is greener on the other side from both sides of the fence, and try to help both those parties just leverage technology to recreate themselves into another, a sustainable model as the ground shifts under us with rates changing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. And let's get into it. Rob, the news of the week, I think without doubt, a big inflation number Tuesday morning, much higher than even lofty expectations. CPI was expected to be up 0.5%, 0.6, up 0.9. You back out food and energy, core CPI was still up 0.6%. Big contributors to that: gas, food, our industry, housing, a big player right now in the inflation we're seeing in the country. And I saw just a couple hours ago, the monthly consumer sentiment reading dropped by like 6 points unexpectedly. If you read inside the numbers, a lot of concern about inflation, a lot of respondents saying that inflated prices are going to be affecting buying decisions as they move forward. And just a lot of polls that have come out these last couple of weeks, reputable polls and pollsters. You boil it all down, 75 to 85% of Americans dissatisfied or concerned about prices of things right now in America. 25 to 40%, depending on the poll and the question, saying it's going to start directly impacting, just buying decisions, things like that. And, how it affects our industry. We saw rates jump up a little bit. I think the 10-year spiked by, about 20 basis points. Last time I checked a couple hours ago, it was at about 160. The historical norm, the 30-year fixed rate, should be a couple hundred basis points higher than the 10-year treasury yield. So, you take out rampant Fed MBS buying, which is going to go away. That would put the 30-year fixed rate in a normalized climate at like 3.6 right now, very close to the Ivy Zellman, 4% number. Now, reality is, because we have buying, it's worth 3.2, 3.25, 3.3 on a 30-year fixed rate. But what level of concern do you have about this? There's, what happened in the 70s end of the spectrum, where we got to this point a little bit worse. What happened was employees started demanding higher wages from employers that had to acquiesce. Employers then raised the prices of goods so they could pay their higher wage demanding people. And inflation got to almost 10% in the 70s, kind of the downfall of the Jimmy Carter presidency. The Fed now is still saying they believe it's transitory, not concerned. Where are you with all this, oh wise one?
Well, you've raised a lot of topics, Rich.
As always.
Good at that. So if you, I like behavioral economics. So, we talked, you look at Ben, you look at Amy, you look at, you look at, Tom, look at me, there are certain things that we need and certain things that we don't need. And heading into the winter, obviously we need heat, and you need clean water, and you need food. And I haven't checked yet. I haven't checked lately to see if the cereal workers are still on strike, but they were on strike for a while. And then heading into the Christmas season here, or holiday season, whatever is the politically correct term these days, you have people wanting to buy Christmas presents for their families. And last Christmas was pretty not somber, but it wasn't, there wasn't a lot of celebrating going on. And I think heading into this Christmas, a lot of families had hoped for, big family gatherings and big, lots of presents under the tree. And so this is really hitting them hard when you combine the inflation numbers with some of the shortages that we've seen, the chip shortages that are impacting everything from phones to cars to microwave ovens and so on. It's not a good situation. And if the price goes up on a microwave that you were going to give your spouse or your son or daughter that just graduated from college, and you want to give them a microwave, you might think twice. On the other hand, wages have been keeping pace to some extent. Wages have been doing okay. And you have a lot of people who've saved up a fair amount of cash throughout 2020 and into 2021. So inflation has definitely been a problem. We've talked about it before, how, you go to a restaurant and holy smokes, what did I pay for those 2 glasses of wine or that plate of pasta? Or you go to a movie theater, or you go, oh, Howard wrote in, you might think twice about giving your spouse a microwave. I've got some jokes that I might want to put in December commentaries about that. Yeah, that's right up there with don't ask your wife what's for dinner while she's mowing the lawn. So anyway, the fact of the matter is we've seen these inflation numbers just when you go to the store, and when you go to a restaurant, or when you check into a hotel or book a flight somewhere. And so inflation, we knew at some point inflation was going to catch up. Now, interestingly enough, what they call the real yield, which is the rate of inflation versus, say, the 10-year yield, has been negative for a while. 10-year down at 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. If inflation is more than that, the real yield, as they say, has been negative for quite some time. Now it's even worse. And I don't disagree with your assessment, your observation that 30-year mortgage rates, tend to be a little hotter. Call it 2% versus the 10-year. There's that spread there for credit risk and for prepayment risk. So yeah, we could see rates well into the threes before year end. But in terms of inflation and the Fed, the Fed has been very careful about discussing inflation, and they want to see a certain level of inflation. There was a targeted inflation rate for a long, long time. At this point, we're way above that. And the question is, what is the Fed going to do about it? How is it going to slam on the brakes? The Fed doesn't set prices. The U.S. government, to a great degree, doesn't set prices in some kind of controlled economies around the world. And so you have a situation where, gasoline prices in California, they're up near $5 a gallon for regular unleaded. All right, like $4.80, I think, is what I saw this morning. $4.80 for a gallon of gasoline. Well, that has a self-breaking kind of thing. As I started off, as I led off saying, well, there's some things that you need to buy: food, water, heat, electricity. There's some things that you don't need to buy. Unfortunately, for many people who are working, they need to buy gasoline. And so this is going to hit their pocketbook pretty hard when they're going out and spending, instead of $50 for groceries, spending 60 or 70. Instead of $3 a gallon for gas, they're spending $3.50 or $4 a gallon for gas. And so inflation has a braking mechanism on the economy, which eventually, interestingly enough, tends to drive rates back down because things slow down if inflation gets too high. Now, I haven't heard too much talk about stagflation, which is an economy in the doldrums, but inflation is going up because the economy in general is picking up some steam. It's not without basis that the inflation rate's going up a little bit. Housing prices are continuing to do well. Car prices are going on the up. Now, many of these things aren't being produced to as much as we'd like, or at least the supply chain is keeping us from getting them as much as we'd like in terms of quantities. And so the real short answer that I think originators need to think about or to have is that consumer sentiment is down. Certainly inflation is going to weigh on consumer sentiment. I think Rich, the consumer numbers that you were talking about this morning was from data, a month or two ago. I think it's not like that doesn't have anything to do with the CPI numbers or producer price index numbers that we saw this week. But inflation does keep people, it is a weight, it's a tax on people. And then the question is, are their wages moving up faster than inflation? Are we going to see workers striking like serial workers? Are we going to have, bank tellers making $25 an hour, minimum wage at Amazon going up to $20 or $25 an hour? And then you get into a situation where there's wage inflation. So yeah, as we pick up steam, excuse me, we're going to see this.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out. You can be really, not that all of Wall Street and industries like ours have not been watching these inflation numbers closely, but after this month's number, another month like this really would start to stoke some fears. I think even change the Federal Reserve's rhetoric and certainly investor expectations upon, what the Fed might do and how quickly. I think right now, the Fed funds future market, has basically priced in that the Fed's going to start raising in the summer, as the expectation has been the fall of 2022. But we'll see how that all plays out. And with that, rents also were sky high. Report that came out this week saying rents year to date are up 16.5% across America. And then Moody's came out with a statement basically saying they thought that rents could go up by like another 10% on average, just between now and the end of the year, based on some of the things that are going on in the housing market. So that inventory piece, such a big piece in the affordability picture. And Ben, the other piece of news that was really noteworthy this week is Zillow. We've been talking about Zillow on this show for the last few weeks, their failed iBuying experiment and what that means for them and for iBuying and for our industry. But a couple key housing focused senators this week came out, and Zillow announced that they were going to be, and Zillow now has a ton of homes they have to offload. And there was an investment firm in New York that they announced that they were going to be selling a couple thousand homes to. A couple senators, including one here from Ohio, Sherrod Brown, who's heavily involved with finance and housing in the Senate. We're like, hold on a second, slow down. Enough institutional ownership of homes in America. Any thoughts on the whole Zillow madness of these last few weeks?
You asking Ben or me?
Ben. For me, it just first off, it underscores a topic that I often repeat to people when they come to me and say, so when are we going to be able to buy a house just like we buy a car today? And I go into my bank and I put in my social security number, and in 30 seconds, I get a blank check from a bank that says up to $30,000. Take this piece of paper to whatever dealership you want, and up to $30,000, you're ready to go. Like, why can't we buy a house like that? And I reference stuff like this. When Fannie and Freddie back 60 to 70% of the whole market, and the federal government is so entrenched in how housing works, and it's so essential to the economic engine. I mean, they can go start buying 40 billion of MBSs and change the economy. It's like, as long as they have that, and you have senators calling Zillow and saying, I don't think you should sell those houses to that PE firm. I mean, housing forever is going to be a complicated and involved process, at least mortgage, right? And that's case in point. And so, I mean, this is a private enterprise, a private entity. They have 2,000 units. When you have, what is the biggest for rent player, build for rent player has like 55,000 units or something now, and Zillow's looking to sell 2,000 units. I mean, it's like, if you're calling Zillow, why aren't you calling these other guys, right? That are bringing on 2,500 units a year in building, that are going straight into the rental inventory and then gobbling up others as fast as they can. And so it's part, I don't know, maybe it's part PR, and like we're fighting for the little guy, but it's a drop in the bucket if you're chasing after 2,000 units, but you're trying to send a message also. But it's really interesting that with, as long as the federal government has the reach that it does, housing will always be a hard process, and it's getting better. Technology is helping, but there's a new thing around every corner, it seems like.
Yeah, I think that we talked about just institutional ownership of homes and, PE firms and investment firms buying houses and renting them, and, that not doing anything for the inventory problem that we have here in America. And you got a presidential administration that's really fighting for affordability on a number of different fronts, and more people being able to afford the dream and vision of home ownership. I thought it was really telling this week, Rob. President Biden, who, really reeling right now just in terms of approval ratings, and finally got the infrastructure deal through, but just at less than a third of what it was supposed to be. And this was supposed to be like the, dog and pony show for the infrastructure bill. Instead, President Biden, partially because there was some illusions that they were caught off guard by the inflation number this week, was playing defense, really spent a lot of the week in appearances and visits talking about inflation, talking about his administration's commitment to combating it. What can a presidential administration do to combat inflation? The Federal Reserve, in theory, works independent from the president and it's not taking direction from the president, yet they're appointed by presidents. Could you shed a little light into that whole world for us?
Sure. The Federal Reserve is independent. However, the Fed governors or the Fed presidents are appointed or nominated by the president, confirmed by Congress. The fact of the matter is, the Federal Reserve, as they have said famously, that the Federal Reserve is there to take the punch bowl away when the party gets going. And they do have tools, as we've seen, that they can take their foot off the gas through tapering. And it is very telling, Rich. If you look at the last Fed announcement, when they announced this tapering, they only went out 2 months. They only have a plan for a couple months in terms of tapering off asset purchases. They can easily speed that up or slow it down based on economic conditions. And they said that. I would be more suspicious if the Fed had come out in their announcement and said, okay, here's our exact schedule for tapering off asset purchases for the next 6 months. That to me would be too much of a crystal ball, which the Fed will freely admit that they don't have. So they went out 2 months, and they're going to obviously constantly evaluate it. They have another meeting, I think the second week of December, maybe the first week of December, second week of December, I think. So they're back chatting about, what's going on with the economy. Obviously, these inflation numbers would influence them. And when you talk about the Federal Reserve, the makeup of the Federal Reserve with the turnover and the retirements going on, and now the financial press is calling into question whether Chairman Jerome Powell will be renominated by President Biden or somebody else. And I personally don't think that. I think Powell's done a very good job myself. Of course, there's going to be people who disagree with anything anybody says at any time. If I say the sky is blue, I say, no, it's kind of gray. Well, oh well. But for the most part, Powell has done a good job, and he has his critics in Congress that are very vocal. But I think Biden will renominate him, and I think that he'll pass. He'll go through, and the other positions will be filled. But there is this political influence on the Fed through the nomination process. And I think the Biden administration will definitely leave an imprint on the Fed based on who it nominates, whether they're dovish or hawkish and so forth. And I think there's a lot of concern right now in the financial markets and the secondary markets, investors, money managers, and so forth, about what the Federal Reserve will look like 6 months from now. They've been very transparent, which is good. It's not the days of Paul Volcker where you had to get out your decoder ring and try to figure out what Chairman Volcker was talking about and where they were going and so forth. The Fed, they have officials speaking all the time about where they think things are and what they think ought to happen. And so I think when this chapter of financial history is over with, I think we'll look back on this and say the Fed did a pretty good job getting us through this pandemic. And what may have caught the Fed by surprise was, inflation being as strong as it was. And did they taper as quickly as they could? And, are they going to raise rates 2 or 3 times in 2022? At this point, that's what the Fed futures market is saying, maybe 3 times next year. And that's definitely not only taking your foot off the gas, but it's putting your foot on the brake. And so I think that the Fed has demonstrated a willingness to be a little bit active, not always proactive, and that's nice to see. But they have a lot of responsibility, and a lot of times they're not working with much more data than we are. So I think they're doing a good job, and I think Powell will be renominated because Biden has enough issues on his plate not to deal with trying to get a new Fed chairman through. So yeah, the inflation picture and what the Fed does with it, I think they're keeping their knees bent. And I think they may change their strategy a month or 2 down the road based on what we're seeing with inflation and other factors. So I think they're doing a good job.
This is the Rundown with Rob and Rich. I'm Rich Swerbinsky with the Mortgage Collaborative, joined as always by Rob Krisman. And this week's special guest co-host, the co-founder of Simple Nexus, Ben Miller. And Ben, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier in the program, because it is something I'm hearing from all of our members. And it is that retail, primarily retail mortgage originators seem to be very focused on either growing or developing direct-to-consumer channels so they could pay their people less. In theory, you have some technology and leads do the work, and you're paying salespeople 25 to 50 basis points instead of 100 to 125. But then also the flip side, our members that are highly consumer direct, seeing a market with less refi, to be sure, more purchase business, wanting to, if it's marketing services agreements or traditional distributed retail, to develop retail channels to get closer to the realtors, the referral sources, and in theory, the purchase market. And I think that's where you were kind of going at the beginning of the show, is that you're seeing the same trends as well. And just if you could expound on that, because it's an interesting dynamic that we're seeing as well within our network.
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind that I didn't mention before is this really showcases the beauty of the independent mortgage banker, the ability to pivot on demand, so to say. This is a cyclical business, and the ground shifts under you, and you got to be ready to change and adapt to continue to be successful in whichever rate environment might be, or whatever's going on with the economy. And this is a perfect example of that. You might have entities that were able to be built for taking advantage of a 60 or 70% refi type split. And now that's changed drastically and going to continue to change, drastically. The forward looking is maybe a 25% split in refi to purchase, right? And so if you were very, very heavy focused in refi, you have to recreate who you are and how you do business. But the fascinating element is, a consumer direct shop is trying to come closer to what are some best practices of distributed retail, or how do I get more purchase business? And then distributed retail is, how do I look more like a consumer direct? And it, at the end of the day, it's trying to control the variables you can control and take advantage of technology or efficiencies where you can, to continue being profitable, continue being a going concern. And that's where I talk about sometimes the lines are blurring between the two, because we sometimes have this image of your traditional distributed retail as a pencil and paper type. I'm going to go out in the community and take a loan app and then go punch it in afterward or whatever into the LOS, but spend all that face time with the consumer. And consumer direct is this faceless, nameless, thing that you interact with, mostly a website, and you don't talk to a person hardly at all, and your loan just pops out on the other side, right? Well, the reality is those are growing closer and closer to each other. because they're leveraging technology to create the best experience, whatever it may be. If you're a call center, or maybe a lot of FIs, you have a bank or credit union that traditionally you have a stationary, somebody in a central building that's working, that may not be out and about as much in the community. But that is shifting toward more of, how do I behave more like a distributed retail type, company, and then distributed retail as well. I'm getting killed by these expenses. The cost of loan just keeps going up and up and up. And now that margins are compressing, it was all great when I was making $5,000 a loan, but the traditional $500 a loan, spread, I've got to do something different, as we revert back to that mean, And so they say, okay, how do I look at, and that's one of the things with eClose. How do I look at eClose not only as a better experience for the borrower, that will create more referrals or things of that nature, but I'm going to make money because I'm going to touch this. I'm going to have fewer touches in manufacturing this product and shipping this product than I had before, right? I'm going to be more efficient in my warehouse line. And making those types of decisions, how do I be more efficient in getting a lead in, and in what way does it convert, to have the fewer touches or fewer, interactions, less expense. And those are forced upon you, because if you don't change, you'll die, right? You'll have to sell, get bought up, caught up in some M&A, or just go out of business. But that's the nature of the IMB. Let's find out what we have to do to keep making it work.
Yeah, one of many things I love about this role with TMC is just getting to interact with leaders, people that run mortgage companies and mortgage operations across America. And, these last 7 years I've been in this role, we've been through a lot of different cycles. It's the winter of 18 to last fall, right? The complete two opposite ends of the spectrum, and seeing companies that are able to grow and thrive and continue to profit and do well in all different kinds of climates. And to me, the number one thing is always just leadership, like companies with great leaders that have vision and don't get stuck in the moment and get stuck in the pipeline, and can lead with vision and kind of go where the puck's going as opposed to where the puck is, and communicate well. That's the biggest thing I've seen just as a predictor of success. But another huge predictor is diversity in your business model. And having levers you can turn on and off, and hedges. And Rob, one of the things we've seen also is just servicing, right? These last year and a half, all this 30-year fixed rate stuff in the twos. Some of the smartest people I know in our network in the industry, had maybe servicing on hold, or but when things really started to pop last summer, started to strategically put more servicing on the books. And we've seen now a lot of those lenders sell those MSRs at nice premiums, and it's a great hedge, right, to your mortgage business, because if rates do go up to 4%, and your volume drops off and your fee income on originations drops off, all that stuff in the twos, the weighted average life on that stuff extends, you get more value on it. So my question for you is, in this opposite cycle, let's say 30-year fixed rates jump into the high threes, like a lot of economists are predicting last year, how you may see mortgage lenders look at their servicing strategies as we approach and get into that type of climate.
Well, you summed it up. The duration of the existing servicing that's on companies' books, whether it's Mr. Cooper or the Rich and Rob company with 50 million of servicing, the duration extends, the value goes up. You mentioned it. It's a hedge. It's a very imperfect hedge. When you talk to servicing experts about, can companies really bank on the value of their servicing on their balance sheet, offsetting the drop in volume? And it's nice to have a nice balance sheet, but that doesn't pay the rent. And so the cash flow does cover that to some extent. But yeah, it's nice to have servicing. That said, and you brought it up, last year in 2020, we saw a large number of companies once the value of servicing went to zero, and aggregators just weren't paying for it. Companies held on to it. and they enlisted the help of a myriad of subservicers that are out there and are still out there. But now, with the belt tightening that's going on, we're seeing those same companies say, well, you know what? We knew we kept the servicing for a reason. It was worth zero then. It's worth, point now, maybe even more based on the coupon. And so let's sell it. And we're going to use that money to help fund our operations. And then the question is, are they using it to fund their month in and month out operations because they're inefficient? Or are they using it to, what are they doing with the money?
Mhm.
Are they going to buy more service? I mean, there's all kinds of things going on out there. So yeah, I think it's a good time to own servicing, probably a good time to sell servicing, especially if it's got a low coupon. And if you're a small company and you need money to make your payroll, then yeah, sell servicing. And I'm seeing a lot of servicing trade right now. So, and that's exactly the reason, because smaller companies need the money.
Absolutely. Just a few minutes left in the program. Some other things of note that popped up in the news this week. Delinquency rates in general down almost 300 basis points from this time last year, kind of giving credence to Rob, but we suspected that all these loans coming out of forbearance, a lot of these people were able to pay and they were just taking the vacation. Fannie and Freddie, 5.3 billion with a B in adverse market fee collection. Again, there's costs associated with the forbearance programs and all that, but I just thought that was a large number. And regulators with a pretty strongly toned wording to mortgage servicers, I think pretty clear that the new regulatory community is going to have zero tolerance whatsoever with any type of mistreatment of borrowers that may have some problems paying or need help. So if you're a servicer, another thing to consider as people think about their servicing strategy going forward, you get in these democratic CFPB environments, it's more costly to service because of just the compliance related aspects of it as well. So any thoughts on any of that noise?
Yeah, I'll sum up the regulatory environment in 1 minute, Rob. I spent a fair amount of time with Mitch Kiter. In fact, I saw him last night, and he is full of dire predictions about the CFPB and fair lending and redlining and enforcement actions, creating the rules rather than the rules creating the enforcement actions. So, Rich, hats off to you. You've been saying for quite a while that we are going to see a changed regulatory environment, and we're seeing it. And I think if companies don't have a beefed up compliance department, they definitely should. But we can talk about that next Friday. I know we're out of time.
My left tackle analogy, right? Your head of compliance is your left tackle. Protect the quarterback's blind side. And, Ben, we know you're going to be watching Florida State, Miami, Florida this weekend, but any good plans out in Utah this weekend, the Jello capital of the world? Those that maybe were a couple minutes late logging on, most per capita Jello consumption in America and Utah, according to Rob Chrisman. So,
well, yeah, I got to try to catch a game. Gonna probably have it recorded and watch it when it's more convenient. And because one of my hobbies is work, just enjoy what we do. And it's kind of funny. It makes me think about when you were talking about earlier, managing costs and with servicing and whatnot. If you're supplementing your income right now because you think that this may be cyclical and things are going to get back to the $2,000 and $3,000 and $5,000 heyday, you're kidding yourself. And there's got to be, I think, a Warren Buffett quote out there somewhere that says when the tide goes out, you can see who was swimming, without the trunks on. And so, this is going to expose a lot of companies that aren't taking the measures now to right the ship, and become more efficient and fix their operations. But yeah, just enjoying some beautiful weather before it gets terribly cold out in Utah. Being a Florida transplant, yeah, I know it's going to turn cold every year, and that's tough. But at least Utah also has the greatest snow on earth to go along with all the Jello we eat. So.
Rob, your Golden State, you mentioned last Friday you were, excited to watch the Warriors game Friday night. Your Warriors are off to a hell of a start. My Cavs actually are off to a surprising good start as well. But who you dunking on this weekend?
What am I doing? I'm gonna bake a couple pumpkin pies and go play tennis with a buddy here right after this call.
A wholesome, good old American weekend. So there you go. To our attendees, thank you as always for joining us every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern, the rundown with Rob and Rich, take you into the weekend, some lighthearted looks at all the craziness going on in our crazy industry, and continue to be here every Friday at 3. And many thanks to our special co-host this week, co-founder of Simple Nexus, great company. And I say it all the time, special place in my heart for people and companies that believed in TMC when we were nothing. And Simple Nexus goes back about as far as anybody. So appreciate you guys. And it has been just awesome watching you guys just explode these last 5-6 years. And to your point, I think people want to consolidate vendors. Like there's a lot of vendors that you need. And you guys, I think, have done a great job continuing to bring new, excellent solutions to market and get more and more people on your platform. So thank you, Ben.
No, thank you guys.
Yes,
Fun
thank
hanging out with you.
Awesome.
Great weekend.
Beautiful.
All right.
Until next week, have a great weekend, everyone. We'll see you next Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Take care.
See ya.